Where is the wise man? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of this age? Get down! Baltimore!
What are they giving?
Everything out of me. They gonna get a Super Bowl out of me. Believe that. Believe that.
All right, welcome on back to another edition of the Baltimore Beatdown podcast. It is a quiet Sunday night here in the greater Baltimore area, I guess. My name is Jake Luke. I'm joined on my screen by two young gentlemen, the first of which is Spencer Nathaniel Schultz. How's it going, pal?
Going quite well. The preseason is wrapped up. We're just hanging out, relaxed. A quiet Sunday night's the best way to put it. House of Targaryen coming on in a little bit here. So we're fired up. Orioles win a big series in Houston. And as we said off air, we now have a very special guest. I'm not sure if he's I guess you're my wife, Jake, and Kevin is my Gumar. We've got Kevin Ostreicher with us live the first time somehow after years of you two joining up. I'm a jerk and hasn't ever registered to me to have Kevin on. So Kevin, thank you for joining us, my friend.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So it's been about over 3 years now, or right around 3 years since Spencer and I've been doing Locked On Ravens.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think August of 2019. So that 14-2 season, we got off to a pretty good start. But I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, no, it's good to have you, man. We really appreciate you hopping on, and the wife and the Gumar joke I think is really fitting. I'm happy to be the wife in this case, if that is in fact the what you're saying here, Spenny. I'll certainly take it. But Kevin's probably a pretty darn good Gumar, so probably a good get for this episode, I would think.
I've got my mustache man, and I've got my clean shaven Kevin. We're just rocking, we're rolling, and we're having fun, baby. I'm excited.
Yeah, we're all very excited. The Ravens get through yet another preseason without dropping a game, which is huge. I mean, what are they up to? Is it 23 in a row now?
I think so. It is 23 exactly. So wanted to jump on, talk about that a little bit. Talk about, it's time now we can reflect. Like you said, it's Sunday night. We're chilling. Vibes are at a very high point ahead of the regular season. The Ravens, you want to knock on wood, have made it relatively healthy through training camp and everything ultimately. And here we are.
Yeah, here we are. Kevin, what's been your collective vibe throughout the course of this preseason? I know you're always prolific on social. You're getting the clips out there and everything. How's this August been for you?
It's been good. I mean, I think the question heading into the preseason was, were they going to ever lose in the preseason again? And I think my answer now is no. I think they're going to continue winning. It will get up to 50 straight, 100 straight. It's never going to end. I mean, that last loss, 2015. Can you guess, guy? I want to put a question. Can you guess who the quarterback was in that game? Who played at quarterback? There were two guys. Who were the two quarterbacks?
Bryn Renner and Bryn Renner.
I don't know. I feel like he's too late. I feel like that's 2018.
Bryn Renner, Mac Schaub. That's my guess.
Yep, exactly. Hit it on the head. Two of them. And I mean, the leading rusher in that game, Terrence McGee. A bit of a throwback name in there. Wow. Fitzgerald Toussaint in there.
Fitzgerald Toussaint. Now we're really talking.
I mean, leading receivers, you have Marlon Brown, Daniel Brown, Darren Waller still on this team too, and the leading tackler is Christo Bilducci.
Darren Waller being a part of that is truly mind blowing. That just put a smile on my face, thinking that Darren Waller was a part of a Ravens team that was doing something in this streak is just
probably still a wide receiver at that point. I think that was his rookie year.
It's unbelievable. And you also have Arthur Brown in there, the former second-round pick. Was that a name that got you?
That feels inappropriate. That was the next Ray Lewis at one point in time, and I was bought in all the way. I'll absolutely tell you that much.
The Matt Elam Arthur Brown combo was something.
Yeah, I guess they were probably both still there, even Elam. So that's wild to think about. I can't even believe that's 7 years ago at this point. It feels like it was literally yesterday. I think I was still in school, and I 100% was actually. So, yeah, that was the last time they took an L. So it was certainly a big August. To your point there, Spenjamin, I know you've been enjoying this August yourself. I know you're cracking into that tape as you usually do, and you're having some good takeaways. I've noticed.
I mean, sure. I usually just collect the thoughts of those smarter than myself and put my own spin. I'm not that wise, but I know who is wise. But from this specific game, man, I mean, Tyler Linderbaum really blew me away. We're not sure if he's ultimately going to end up playing in this game. Didn't have a ton of buzz going on, anything like that. Is he going to play? Is he not? the foot injury, all of those question marks, the rumblings of rookies past that have been injured for the Ravens and all the bad memories of the Perrimans and Arthur Browns and Sergio Kindles and things of that nature. And to watch him come in and just be exactly what he was in college in the best way possible was incredible. And to watch this Ravens team go depth-wise, I mean, in this game overall, speaking specifically just of the commies, the Commanders, ultimately, they don't have – it wasn't a game where I go back and I watch and I have a bunch of big takeaways, but just I think it was such a fun perspective of putting it in. Those guys, Arthur Brown, Darren Waller, those types of players, and then watching what this has become and thinking of what the era of football was for the Ravens at that time, Joe Flacco after his big contract still, in that situation. And then thinking about, those quarterbacks you mentioned, guys all across the way, and even guys like Tyler Huntley that have just been a constant in terms of depth and some of these key depth pieces, Tony Jefferson, guys like Geno Stone, guys like Demarcus Robinson coming in and being depth while being that talented and having that much experience. It just is the classic Baltimore Ravens DNA. That is what they are. They are depth. They have always been depth. They always want to be depth. And so if there's a big takeaway for this entire streak, this entire August, this offensive line, the injury concerns they've had, it is just depth. And I think that's why they ultimately end up having a streak like this.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's one that I agree with, and one that I actually kind of disagreed a little bit with Glenn Clark when I was on his program a week or two ago. And he's very anti-preseason football to the point of it being comical, and I like to rib him about it a little bit. But yeah, he was saying this is not this streak isn't a testament to anything. It's just weird. It doesn't say anything about them. And I don't know. I totally get his skepticism, on a certain extent, but they are focused on depth to the point that some people actually get a little bit frustrated about that. And they're focused on bringing in young talent via unconventional methods, whether it's late round draft picks at certain positions that they value or undrafted free agents. There's been a ton of buzz about a guy like Josh Ross the last couple of weeks, for example, who might have damn well earned himself a spot on the 53 man. So Kevin, we've joked about the streak. What's kind of your overall thoughts on it? A la Spenny's there.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the most important thing in the world. You don't go into the preseason saying we have to win every single game. I mean, the results of the games don't matter at the end of the day. But I think it speaks to what their depth has been. I mean, they're not putting Lamar Jackson out there every game and saying we have to win this game. We're putting Mark Andrews out and Marlon Humphrey and whatever. It speaks to the depth they've been able to build over these last couple of seasons to the point where it's almost impressive that every single year for these past, 6 years or so, they've been able to build depth time and time again. They have started to now lose. We kind of saw the rookie contract situation. We see guys like Matt Judon get big contracts in New England. Darius Smith go to Green Bay. They're losing talent, but they keep bringing it in. And the fact that they're able to win these games is super impressive. I mean, the fact now that also they're resting rookies that weren't I mean, if you had said, the Ravens are going to rest Isaiah Likely in the third preseason game because he's going to have such a big role in the team, presumably, if you had said that back when he got drafted, it would be no way. It's going to be, Mark Andrews all the way. Nick Bull is going to be in there. Maybe Charlie Kohler factors in, but Likely has established himself and proved that. You have guys like Josh Ross, who you mentioned. So I think the streak does say something. I don't think it's everything. But again, guys like Demarcus Robinson, for example, who he's done it against first stringers, him going out there and putting up 4 for 135 and a touchdown. I mean, I'm glad he did it because that's not against first stringers, but it does say something that they're able to go out there and win all these consecutive games. It speaks to the depth, in my opinion. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, that's one of the weirdest things that I can remember happening is that Demarcus Robinson, who's clearly, in my opinion, a rotational at the very least, NFL receiver, he just gets a start in the last preseason game against guys that are certainly probably not going to be making the roster for the Commanders. And he just goes out there and absolutely stunts on them. That first series, I mean, that double move or whatever it was, the head fake that he put on the corner, and he's just wide open. They were doing they weren't expecting anything to happen, the camera people, because they were in the the over the shoulder shot, and Anthony Brown is just hits him, and it worked out to be a cool angle, I think. But that was just kind of one of the weirder things that I can remember as a guy of that caliber, just getting in there and absolutely just just jaywalking around the field,
dancing into the end zone immediately.
On his way in there, and he looked like he's going to make this team. He's going to play some pretty decent amount of snaps for them, I think. What was your takeaway from D-Rob there, Spen?
Just like you said, he's a veteran. He's an NFL player, and putting him in that situation, he hit 2 double moves for big gains. It's just the confidence that he has immediately coming in, I think, ultimately speaks to what John Harbaugh's Ravens are, that we hear so often where it's ultimately like, oh, Justin Houston says it's all about football in Baltimore. And Stephen Means goes on the podium the other day, and sure, you can probably find other players saying similar things at places, when they get the right fit and something helps their career. But those veterans that come in, they always just say it's all about football in Baltimore. It's only about football. Like, there's no outside noise. They don't care. They just want you to go on the field and perform. It's, not the biggest market in the world, but it has a really, really, really huge fan base, a really tight-knit fan base, a really tight-knit community around the football team. And to watch them be able to go into Owings Mills, into this little football treasure cove of that facility and the beauty that they have at the castle, and being able to immediately integrate into the team and just have fun and play fast, play instantly, and watch the joy. And watching a guy like Anthony Brown, even, who threw that football and was arguably the most kind of criticized quarterback of any kind of Power 5 school last year. Supposed to be a mobile guy, supposed to be able to do this, that, and the other. Oregon has a tough time. He throws pick sixes. He has a really rough kind of season on a pretty darn good team. And to just even simplify it to a UDFA third string potential quarterback to come in and play fast, play smooth, and be able to make that throw and hit those things and play confidently nonstop throughout August. It just is what the Ravens are. I think ultimately, the preseason is a really big microcosm of what this organization is and what they value. And like Kevin, you said, they're not trying to go win these games like in some sort of emphatic fashion. Like, maybe at times they do play some starters more than the other team does, or maybe vice versa, ultimately all of those things. But, why do they go and win week 1 so damn often? And why are they so good in September? I'm going to venture to say it's probably because of what they do in August.
Yeah, and I think what I like about that this year is it kind of feels like they did deliberately take their foot off the gas a little bit with as far as playing starters. Like, they kind of had to do it with what happened in last August, not only in the preseason games, but on the practice field. I think they were just careful. And we talked about this before, where you have the idea of ramping up in August to get ready for September. It feels like what we were saying this year is that September is maybe going to be the ramp up month. Maybe you expect some rockiness, and that'll prime you for October, when John Harbaugh actually usually struggles a little bit. Well, this kind of felt like getting to have their cake and eat it too a little bit, where they were kind of not taking this preseason as seriously as maybe they used to. They still get all these wins though, and they get a lot of really good football out of some of these young guys and prospects. And you see traits with some of these guys. You see traits with Likely. You see traits with Travis Jones before he gets hurt. Falele gets some run. And that's, not even having seen anything from David Ojabo, for example. Kyle Hamilton makes a couple plays. Like, it just felt like they got the best of both of those worlds. So I don't know, man. It just feels like they're in a really, really good spot heading into the regular season. I think for me personally, like, seeing Robinson have that kind of game was huge for my confidence going into week 1 in this team.
Definitely. And so on the other side of the coin, hey, we've gone through now. We've broken down this draft, broken down free agency, broken down OTAs, broken down training camp, broken down preseason. Kevin, now that we're in this free flowing, and like we were saying just off air, your podcast, Locked on Ravens, amazing. Go get your daily Ravens content, Locked on Ravens. Leave Kevin 5 stars. Hook the boy up. Kevin's my man. But in this kind of free-flowing way at the same time, what do you now feel like you wish you saw more of, or you wish that there was ultimately, going to be a little bit more confidence in Jake's tone? He feels confident about Demarcus Robinson, those kinds of things. So based on what you've seen, how do you feel about, where your eyeballs are going to go, and what are your narratives and things that you're thinking of that maybe raise eyebrows or a little more concerned, and what are you curious about heading into this season?
Yeah, I think an area where I guess curious could be the word is the running back rotation. I think obviously with Gus Edwards being on the PUP list, the reserve one, he's not going to suit up for at least the first 4 games. You're wondering where J.K. Dobbins is going to be week 1 if he even does suit up in that game. So assuming he plays a bit of a role, the other guys you're looking at are Mike Davis, Tyler Beatty, and I'm assuming Justice Hill is going to make the roster. So those are the 4 I have right now. And look, we saw some things out of some of those running backs. We didn't see, massive amounts, but I'm interested to see how the running back rotation works, because obviously I think early in the season, the Ravens do, I think, value the experience of veterans. We saw that back in 2020 when Mark Ingram was still in Baltimore. You had J.K. Dobbins too. Dobbins was ripping off like 40-yard runs, 35-yard runs. I think in his first 6 games, he only had 25 carries, but he was averaging like ridiculous yards per carry because he was just, every single run was this game-breaking thing. But the Ravens still leaned on Mark Ingram a ton and Gus Edwards a ton. And then finally, J.K. Dobbins just beat the door down. And the Ravens said, look, we have to play him. He's too good to not play. So for a situation with Tyler Beatty, obviously 6th-round pick versus 2nd-round pick is very different in terms of that. But the yards per carry stats for Beatty aren't pretty. I think he showed more than the box score, though. I think he did impress in multiple areas. Davis, I thought, showed some stuff. Justice Hill, I mean, that first game had multiple good pass protection pickups. I'm interested to see how they use those guys. I'm not saying I'm completely confident in all those players, but I think that they can hold the fort down, I'd say, until J.K. Dobbins can get back, until Gus Edwards can get back. And who knows, maybe those guys will have to really have a big ramp-up period. We're not going to see full-strength J.K. Dobbins maybe till week 8 or week 10. Maybe Gus Edwards isn't full-strength the entire year. We just don't know how the injuries work out. I think on the other side of that coin on defense, what's the edge situation looking like? Tyus Bowser goes on that reserve PUP list. Baltimore did bring back Justin Houston, a guy Spencer knows I've been a fan of for multiple years now. We talk about Justin Houston extensively over on my show. But other than that, Dalen Hayes, I don't think showed as much as some people wanted him to during the preseason. Other than that, you have Chuck Wiley, who did show some flashes, Jeremiah Moon, who did show some flashes, but do you need somebody else there? I know the Ravens brought in Jason Pierre-Paul. Is that an option? Are there any other guys? Maybe a trade candidate situation like that. So I think when you're looking at both offense and defense, those are a couple of positions where I'm just kind of interested to see what goes on there, because I think the depth, they have it at running back. The edge depth, I think, is probably one of the bigger concerns for me right now, though.
Definitely very well said. Pardon me, but it's also the edge position and the wide receiver position. Also for the, I would say for the average fan that kind of just, box score, you like the game, you follow along lightly, you end up seeing like, all right, well, wide receiver, they haven't had that all pro. They haven't had that Pro Bowl player. They haven't had that star there. In the edge room, since Terrell Suggs, sailed off into the sunset, they really haven't had that production, that box score production. So it just kind of goes hand in hand with, I guess, what a lot of fans have been concerned about for a long time in terms of, well, they want a 10-sack guy and they want, a 10-touchdown, 1,000-yard receiver, a 100-catch guy, and those things. And it's just interesting at the same time, to watch the Ravens really just continue to look at those, I guess, as a market inefficiency where they think that they can get good enough production without really spending a ton of assets. So, again, it just feels like a different day and the same story in many ways, especially in those two rooms. And you hit the nail on the point with the running backs. I mean, Mike Davis is probably RB1 by a good margin right now. Heading into the season, you don't want to dance J.K. Dobbins too much and too long into the night, before you even get to the honeymoon. So very, very good points all around, and just strange to see in many ways, especially the running back position, which felt so strong when they had Edwards and they had Dobbins in that 2020 season rolling. Like you said, Dobbins averaging 6 yards a carry. So those position rooms are definitely where you want to think, where you want to go, where you want to watch. And feels like, I guess to look way too far ahead to 2023, where they're probably going to be making some moves to bring guys in.
One thing I will ask, what's going on with the left guard spot? They drafted Ben Cleveland a year ago in the 3rd round. He has not shown them nearly enough. They're filtering in Tyree Phillips and Ben Powers, and then Ben Powers gets the Isaiah Likely treatment, and he doesn't play in last night's game. A very strange situation where Ben Powers doesn't play. Is he the starter right now in your guys' eyes?
I always thought Tyree Phillips was kind of going to de facto get that job again and be able to run with it. They trotted him out there last year. They played him a lot as a rookie, which doesn't happen, especially for past day one Ravens rookie offensive linemen. Pretty rare to see them draft someone and then immediately get kind of integrated into the lineup. So always kind of thought that was the direction. At the same time, Ben Powers had a lot of snaps too. A guy that's always been a little bit more stiff, I'd say, and is a mauler in many ways, wants to go beat you up in the run game, wants to get after it, but just maybe not the most flexible and kind of, superstar athletically kind of level guy. So like you said, Cleveland there as well, misses some time early in camp. So another huge question mark, and we're going to ultimately get the answer, but just feels like another area, if you're identifying those kind of, I guess, dark side of the moon parts of the Ravens roster right now, where there are questions, there are possibilities, and anything feels open. Kevin, how are you feeling about this offensive line, left guard spot, everything in general, offensive line wise?
Yeah, the Ben Powers thing was a little bit of a shock to me. I'm not going to lie. I think the sitting him, there are either two very wide-ranging outcomes of this. Either he is the starter or they wanted to not play him to get traded. It's probably more so the starter, but the whole offseason, and Spencer, I agree, I had Phillips kind of locked into that spot personally. Powers is someone who they were kind of showing off the versatility with a little bit throughout the preseason. You see him get some center snaps throughout training camp, and you're kind of like, what is the deal with him? But if he's kept on the roster, and I'm assuming Tyree Phillips and Ben Cleveland get kept too, that'd be pretty shocking if they weren't. The Ravens, I think, in my count might be a tiny tad off, but I think they have 11 offensive linemen that I think deserve roster spots in that situation. And there's going to be a ton of roster shuffling that goes on. Guys going on IR, handshake deals, maybe keeping a guy here or there. But can the Ravens afford to keep 11 offensive linemen on the roster to start with guys, like Charlie Kohler being on there maybe before going on IR? What's the situation with Travis Jones? Or do they have to get rid of a guy maybe like it's Justin Cologne, who is your kind of third backup center, depending on how you classify Patrick McCary as the super sixth sub offensive line guy? But I think it all does hinge on Ronnie Stanley. I think that is the key piece for them. Him coming off of the PUP list was huge news. Now, is he going to be ready for week one? We don't know that yet, but this is a positive step in the right direction. But I'm more confident in their depth this year than I was last year. I mean, the Alejandro Villanueva signing, they signed him to move over to right tackle and play right tackle. Stanley plays the one game. They have to move him back over to the left side. It never felt like he was purely set somewhere. And then he finally gets out on the left tackle, and the results were not encouraging, to say it pretty lightly. So I think for what the Ravens have now, you have Jawan James, who's shown some flashes. You can put Morgan Moses there if you need to. Daniel Falele can play there if you need him to. Also, you have the situation now where you can kind of go through Ronnie Stanley maybe having to miss a couple games if he's not ready for week one. But I think when he's on the field and he's fully healthy, he just adds so much. And it's all a question of where's the mobility. That ankle injury was it was brutal. Like, it was horrendous to watch, and the recovery from that, him going for the second surgery. So the questions become, where's the mobility with him? But you talk about other positions, if Powers is the left guard from left to right, you go fully healthy, Stanley, Powers, Linderbaum, Zeitler, and Moses. That group, I think, is better than what they had last year, especially at the end of the season. No question about that. Morgan Moses, I think, going to provide them solid veteran leadership there. And the theme of the offseason for the Ravens, or at least some of it, was durability. I mean, Morgan Moses, ever since his rookie year, has played in every game, started all but one. That's someone you want on your offensive line. Linderbaum, showed some good flashes on Saturday against the Commanders. So I'm excited to see. And Kevin Zeitler should have been a Pro Bowl last year, by the way. I'm going to put that Pro Bowl agenda out there for him. So left to right wise, I feel much better than where they were last year. But at the same time, I think it does hinge on Ronnie Stanley.
Most definitely. And the catalyst here ultimately. So I guess kind of going into the micro, to go more macro, like we said, Kevin, you've been doing your show. You've been very closely covering the Ravens for Ravens Wire, Locked on Ravens. Jake and I have been doing this, a couple years now, all three of us now, I guess, 3-4 plus years. Where are you guys at? And I want to start with you, Jake. Where are you guys at just in terms of, based on looking through the global 30,000 foot overview, where do you feel and what are you looking at and how does it feel in comparison with years like 2018, 2019, 2020, all the way up through today ultimately?
I mean, it feels a little, I don't want to say lazy necessarily, but it feels a little cliche to say that I'm getting 19 vibes, but I kind of am a little bit. And that's not to say 14-2 is in the cards, because I think, that team maybe even played a little bit above their talent level. I think they punched above their weight. I think that was maybe more of like a 12-4 type team that kind of willed their way to 14-2, just kind of rode a wave a little bit. So I could see this, and I think I might have thrown 12-5 out there already as a prediction. I just feel like they're really solid in a lot of spots, and receiver is definitely a concern for me. It's been a concern for a long time, but Robinson coming in assuages some of those a little bit. And it feels, I'll say, a lot better than it did last year at this time. Last year, I definitely talked myself into it. I do that every single year, but they had gotten all these receiving weapons with Watkins and with Bateman, and they had Hollywood Brown in the building, but there was neglect along the offensive line. And you sort of, as a fan, I try to avoid doing this as a podcast host, but I'm a fan first, and it slips in a little bit where like, they're just going to throw the ball all over the yard, and they're the Ravens, so they're just going to figure offensive line out, and that didn't work out. And that really cost them big time. And they probably shouldn't have been, 8-9, and they probably shouldn't have missed the playoffs, but everything kind of broke against them in the second half of the season. And, they got some breaks early on in the year, of course, last year, but, kind of a 500 team was what they ultimately were in my mind when you think back on it. And this just doesn't feel that way to me. This feels a lot more stable. This feels like a team that is built to weather storms a little bit. There's a lot more depth in important spots for the way that they like to build this team and the way they like to play football. So I'm feeling pretty darn good about them in a quiet way. It's not like a ton of hype either, which I like to, that.
Definitely. And the part that I love there is you talk about Demarcus Robinson. He feels a lot like Willie Snead in many ways. Not the same player, not the same skill set, different body type, plays out wide. many ways, but just a player that's a veteran, calm presence that'll probably move the chain, score a couple touchdowns, and keep things going. But Kevin, I mean, how are you feeling at this point? Year 4 for you, right, as well?
Yeah, heading into year 4 now, and it's crazy because 2019, like the 12-game win streak and everything, it came out of nowhere, but at the same time, it almost didn't. Like they had the talent to do it. And I go back to how that year started. I mean, they were 2-2. They suffered really ugly losses to Kansas City and Cleveland. The defense, I think, gave up 500 total yards in both weeks, like separately, 500. I mean, the Ravens after that, it was all business. I mean, they got rid of Tim Williams. They trade Kenny Young in a fifth for Marcus Peters somehow. That's turned into something great. And then they go on that run. And then the next year, it feels like, all right, the Ravens now have that target on their back. Like teams are looking, like Lamar Jackson, second ever unanimous MVP. They are looking for ways to slow down this Ravens offense. And while the start of the year,
the Bengals, for instance, built their defensive roster to do exactly that.
Right, exactly. And you see the sideline, like Akeem Davis-Gaither and all these players who have the sideline to sideline speed to go out there and stop a player like Lamar Jackson. But that year, 2020, did start off, I'd say, a bit inconsistent overall. They kind of had to find their identity a little bit throughout those games, a couple of tough losses in there, but they end up finding it over the last month of that year. They averaged like an ungodly amount of yards on the ground. Like it was incredible how much they just dominated on the ground. 2021, it almost feels like a year that didn't happen. Like it doesn't feel like it was real. And I mean, I imagine if that Poe injury, just to sidetrack, happened last year during a game at halftime, it'd be like, oh my, like, okay, of course the mascot gets injured in a year that they had the most like terrible injuries ever. But at the same time, you look at that year, it was almost like this year is what that year was supposed to be. And I was consistent last year saying that the AFC Championship game, I think, was a realistic expectation for them. The Ravens have been to the wild card round. They've done that. They've now been to the division round a couple times. I think they also, it's continuing to grow, continuing to build on what they've gotten. If it's just wild card divisional, it's the complacency aspect of it that I don't think works for NFL franchises. I think you have to continue to ascend past that goal. So last year I was saying, well, if you're going off that theme, the AFC Championship is that next stepping stone for you. Not saying they can't win the Super Bowl or can't do this or can't do that, but I think that would be a realistic expectation for them. So now this year, you're looking at it, the guys they're getting back, I think, are just pluses in general. I mean, they signed Marcus Williams, they signed Morgan Moses, they have the 11-player draft class, but as cheesy as it sounds, like J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and Marcus Peters and Ronnie Stanley, all those guys are like cherries on top almost, which obviously they're all very important, but they almost seem like other acquisitions coming in because they either played in 1 or 0 games last year. So you're getting those reinforcements too. So I have my prediction right now is 13-4, 12-5, like in that area, which I think is realistic based off of as well how just strong the AFC is in general, which we could see probably 3 or 4 teams in the AFC that have very good records and are very good that don't make the playoffs altogether this year.
Definitely. And I love that point you make about, cherries on top for those injured guys. It isn't Madden. They don't just come back and return to their overall rating and immediately play. And it feels like, they need a guy like Ronnie Stanley. Of course, they need Marcus Peters, but they have tried to build in that sense. And I guess kind of my big takeaway from this whole summer and this whole preseason is that, man, to have a preseason overreaction, I really do think this draft class is special quickly. And that's, like you said, David Ojabo hasn't played. Travis Jones is banged up. We haven't seen a lick of Jalen Armour-Davis outside of camp. All those guys. But thinking about like Pepe Williams, thinking about Likely, thinking about, Linderbaum, who goes in and looks outstanding in I guess 2 series, maybe 3 series on Saturday night ultimately. So many of those guys just look ready. They look ready to contribute quickly. And while not all of them are, to go off the first few, Notre Dame, Iowa, Michigan, Travis Jones was UConn, but aside from that, Minnesota, Bama, Iowa State, Penn State, these were guys that were playing multiple years for Power 5 teams. Tyler Beatty was a leading rusher in the SEC. Like, these guys are ready to go contribute quickly. They drafted, it feels like, to take that next step. And for the Ravens to always preach that they want to be, and to your point, Kevin, they want to preach consistency year to year. They want to be competing every year to go to the playoffs, to win the division, to win the AFC, to win the Super Bowl. You do need to take that next step forward. And I feel like they did draft that way this year. Hamilton is not a project. Linderbaum is not a project. Ojabo hurt. Jones, not a project. Those first couple picks felt like big school experienced guys that are ready to come in and contribute, as opposed to, Odafe Oweh, I wouldn't say he's a developmental player that they drafted in the first round last year, but definitely had some work to do as an athlete, things like that. It's relatively similar to Ajabo in some ways. Ben Cleveland had some work to do. Brandon Stevens, they take in the third round last year, had a ton of work to do. A guy that was a running back a couple years ago. So feels like they kind of drafted differently, and to get those guys back that you mentioned would be absolutely awesome to put that cherry on top ultimately. So I guess my big takeaway from this whole summer is really just, I think this is a sweet rookie class that has a lot of unique skill sets. Hamilton being a gigantic safety, Linderbaum being a really quick finesse center, Travis Jones being hopefully a dynamic kind of interior pass rusher, Falele, a Godzilla built, top 1 percentile size-wise kind of guy. So very kind of cherry on top skill sets that they brought in that can go play on the field, can go do certain things and fill certain roles for them. So my overreaction, I guess, to sum it all up is just that they have guys that are ready to come in as rookies and compete.
Yeah, you talk about like righting some of the past wrongs that they made too. I mean, like we talk about 19 as this like dream season, and it really was. But, they kind of made a long-term mistake with that Earl Thomas signing that actually worked out very well for them that year. But ultimately, it just wound up that the guy was a dick and he just was not going to work in that building. And, they get rid of him, and they have a hole at safety there for 2020 and 2021 to an extent. And it's just like, man, they really missed out on what could have been a really awesome kind of long-term signing at safety. And now they go and get that with Marcus Williams and, at right tackle, they made a mistake last season.
It's been like their white whale in ways.
It has, yeah. It's definitely like Ozzie. One of the first things Ozzie said after that 2012 season when Reed left was, "I want to go and get a rangy playmaking safety." And they just were, Weddle to an extent was kind of that. He was more of a box safety by that point in his career, but he could still make some plays through the air. They get it with Thomas for 1 year, and it winds up that he's doing whatever he's doing with his brother and whatever is going on there. And then he's gone, and it's just, that has been the white whale. And hopefully Williams is going to be that guy. I have confidence that he's going to be, and he's smack dab in the prime of his career. So that's very exciting. They make the mistake with Villanueva. Even having him just be a right tackle was probably a mistake. And he wound up having to play left tackle for them. Brutal. And then, they didn't have any insurance beyond that for Stanley. So Jawan James as a project actually seems to be working out pretty well. Morgan Moses projects to start for pretty much the entire year. Falele as a developmental guy. I just love what they've done to kind of right some of those past wrongs.
Definitely very well said. So, and maybe throwing in a guy like Josh Ross in there, a couple others that can just come make a splash as younger players. So, I mean, those are really my big takeaways. Kevin and Jake, whatever you guys want to, I feel like we had a very clean, full circle to summarize, where we're at here, but I guess kind of any closing remarks.
I mean, I guess one is that I think the Ravens practice squad will again be pretty strong this year. I mean, we're going to go through a lot of roster decisions, a lot of roster shuffling. Eric DeCosta and company have, I think, some good problems to sort out in terms of how much depth they have. But you're looking at almost like a quarterback situation with Anthony Brown, who, I think has shown that he at the very least deserves to be on the Ravens practice squad. Now, there's been all the rumblings about Tyler Huntley. What should they do? Should they trade him? Should they keep him and whatnot? But I think for now, the Ravens probably do keep 2 quarterbacks. I just think there are too many other positions that need attention elsewhere. Maybe they keep 3. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's 2 for now. But then also the signing of DeMarcus Robinson, I still think they keep 5 guys. And so that pushes guys like Shamar Bridges maybe onto the practice squad if he gets there, Mekhi Polk, Riley Webb, etc. Those are options there. You can add a couple offensive linemen to that mix. I mean, on the defensive line, I know things are maybe a bit more complicated now with the Travis Jones injury, and now even Aaron Crawford, who John Harbaugh said might have suffered a serious groin injury. We don't know the extent of that yet, but a guy like Isaiah Mack, who I don't think will make it to a practice squad. I think he's good enough to go be on a 53-man somewhere else, but I just don't think there's a spot for him, despite how I think impressed with him I've been. I mean, inside linebacker, we've talked about Josh Ross this entire time, which I do think he is going to make the roster at this point. But Christian Welch goes out there and has a pretty strong game on Saturday against the Commanders. So where does that leave him if they only keep 4 guys because they keep extra defensive backs? And speaking of that, I mean, where's our Darius Washington factoring into this? Geno Stone. You look at all these players. I think Baltimore, if they can sneak enough of these guys, maybe if they lose a couple, like we saw it last year with Nigel Warrior and Nate McCurry, if they can sneak most of these guys into the practice squad, maybe add a couple others in there, their practice squad, if they have to go through injuries again, they'll be able to call up some guys who contributed in the preseason and could maybe play some roles for them down the line.
Yeah, I think Anthony Brown, too, he is intriguing to me, and I do think he will be able to make it to the practice squad because, you talk about, some of this roster crunch that they're having in other spots. I mean, 31 other teams are dealing with that, too. And, he's definitely shown a lot. I said last night on Twitter that I think he's definitely an NFL quarterback. He could be a backup, I think, at least for for, a decently long career. So he's exciting to me as well as kind of that, quarterback factory Ravens. They're going to find a way to make something out of him.
It just makes a ton of sense. And in the Chinese Zodiac, it is the year of the tiger. But I feel like exactly that point, we're talking to Anthony Brown, and it feels like, again, to the nth degree in a year that could ultimately result in maybe some changes next year, coaching wise, many things. I think number one big thing I want to dive deeper into later on maybe another episode, Mike McDonald, 34 years old, first year in the NFL as a play caller. That's flown under the radar. A guy that feels like hasn't had a ton of pressure, all of those things. But in the John Harbaugh world, it feels like this is the most John Harbaugh year. It's the year of the tiger in the Chinese Zodiac. It is the year of depth for the Ravens and them trying to fill out those tackle spots. We mentioned all those injured players where they have tried to supplement or saturate is the word I'm looking for, saturate depth into those areas, corner, tackle, the primo positions of areas that they've been hurt by. So I think this is the year of depth, and I think that's why this streak has gone the way it has, and I think this is kind of the full tilt of it.
It's the picture of the iceberg where you have the not a lot of the iceberg at the top, and that's the one you can see. But underneath, that's where the real depth is. That's where things are really happening. So
the 90% that's under the surface there. Well said. Well, that's all I got, guys. I mean, this is a tight 35. Kevin, we have you on. Jake, it's been your birthday. You're an old man now. We haven't even talked about that. Happy birthday, Jake. What was your birthday? Thursday or Wednesday?
Wednesday.
Exactly. So birthdays, all kinds of good stuff. Chinese Zodiac, it's a year of the tiger. Jake looks like the eye of the tiger, and we're ready for some regular season football, guys.
Yeah, we're entering my late 20s, I guess, at this point. I think so. I think, yeah, 27, I guess, would be late 20s. I'm gonna push that mid to late 20s. I'm gonna say I'm in my mid to late 20s, and that's what we're gonna do. But
you're in your upper middle class 20s.
Yeah, exactly. Great way of putting it. You always have an ear for these things. But yeah, thank you everyone for reaching out and wishing me happy birthday on Twitter that did, and everyone in the comments that is right now. You guys are great. So, Kevin, a nice birthday gift from you to me hopping on here. Thank you very much for joining us. Great to meet you as in the office world, like
as so many of my emails do say. Great to meet you.
Yeah, it was good to meet you too. And next time the Ravens play football, it'll be that seemingly Lamar Jackson versus Joe Flacco showdown, which I'm sure many people are looking forward to. But it was great coming on here. Happy birthday from me to you too, Jake.
Now you're obligated to do Locked On Ravens. Now you have to have.
I know. Now we're gonna set it up. It'll be Spencer Tuesday, Jake Wednesday, or something. So we'll do something like that. So we'll get them on for sure. But I appreciate you guys. This was a fun episode.
Definitely was. Yeah, thanks everyone for hopping in the comments. We had an active chat tonight. Everyone kind of hopping in here, commenting. It was a ton of fun as always, chopping it up with everyone in there. Thank you all for the interaction. Kevin, where can they find you and your pod, your social? Why don't you plug all your stuff before we get you out of here?
Yeah, for sure. So I am on Twitter at ChaosSharker34. The Locked On Ravens account is Locked On Ravens. I do host Locked On Ravens. We do 5 days a week, daily Ravens coverage. So Ravens news, analysis, updates, where anywhere you get your podcast. So Apple Podcasts.
And if you happen to be a Denver Nuggets fan, Kevin is your freaking guy.
Yes, Nikola Jokic, back-to-back MVP. He deserved it both years. I'm a big Denver Nuggets guy. We're also on YouTube though for Locked On Ravens. We it's the same show, audio and video, so you're not missing out on anything. But yes, I will push my Denver Nuggets agendas on those shows sometimes. So you got to watch out. So I appreciate everybody, for tuning in, listening there, and I appreciate you guys too for having me on.
Yep, absolutely. And as two guys that know what it's like to go on a tangent from time to time on here, we can definitely relate to that. So thanks for your time, bud. We'll definitely be doing it again soon. Hopefully we'll continue to cross airwaves here as we head into what's going to be year 4 for both of us. Going to be the biggest, best year yet. I can feel it. So thanks for hopping on with me, Benjamin. Always great hanging out with you. You can find him on Twitter.
We didn't review House of Targaryen episode 1, but Tuesday we're doing a first 2 episodes review. We promised we would do a 5-minute or less review. We're doing it Tuesday. We forgot.
Yeah, no, we're definitely going to do that. And the fact that it's 9 p.m. and then we would have to watch the full hour and then start recording at 10, I'm getting old now. I can't do that. So yeah,
well, you got a big bottle of whiskey sitting right next to you. Yeah, you can't do that stuff anymore.
That was a birthday gift. So let's not get into that. But you can find Gentle Spen Crenshaw on Twitter at Ravens4Dummies. That's the number 4 in the middle. I am at Jake Luke. That's LOUQUE. You can follow our show at Podcast Beatdown. Thanks as always, guys. We will talk to you later in the week.
See ya.
Arrivederci.
Where is the wise man? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of this age?
are they getting? Everything out of me. They gonna get a Super Bowl out of me. Believe that. Believe that.